Brought to you by Penguin.
The Right Thing, written by Judy Astley and read by Diana Bishop. For Annie, my dancing friend. Chapter 1. Large Antonia must have slimmed down a huge amount to fit into her coffin. Instead of the 4-square mahogany box the size of a grandmother's wardrobe that Kitty had been expecting, the casket was a narrow, elegant, pale oak number, reminding her of the flooring she'd almost chosen for the sitting room. She was glad now that she'd gone for the beach instead. The last thing she wanted as she trod between the front door and the kitchen for the next however many years was to be reminded of the tall, fat, frightened girl she and Julia Taggart and others had so brutally bullied at school all that time ago. Upside down in the Range Rover, 3 hours to cut her out, a woman was murmuring in the pew behind her. Julia Taggart, next to Kitty, turned her ferrety head and her eyes swivelled sideways to see who was speaking. Kitty nudged her, embarrassed. Julia had always been shamelessly nosy, progressing from early trawling for scandal with her ear to the school staff-room door to taking on the running of the Hartsvale Old Girls newsletter. No one she had ever come across in her whole life could marry, give birth, get divorced, ennobled, imprisoned or die without the information somehow finding its way past Julia first. The small village church was full, and its chill, stony air was moist with so much unaccustomed collective breath. Some people were even standing at the back, and as the congregation rose to sing Jerusalem, Kitty wondered how many of them, like her, were simply there through chance, rather than a heartfelt wish to pay their last respects to Antonia. "Oh, do come with me. It's only a couple of miles from you. I'll come to you, stay the night, and we can go together," Julia had persuaded over the phone, assuming, as all people from London did, that Devon and Cornwall formed just a teeny village peninsula tacked prettily onto the end of England. "After all, funerals aren't like weddings, are they? You don't need invitations. No one will ever know you weren't her very closest friend. They'll just assume you kept up with her through the hogs like I did." Except her very closest friends, not to mention her family, her neighbours, all that. "And I haven't even set eyes on her since the final speech day," Kitty had protested, picturing large Antonia at 14, green eyes wild for mercy, as Kitty, Julia, Rosemary Jane Piggott, and the rest of their vicious circle had hoisted her up high in the cloakroom and made her swing from the hot water pipes till she shrieked with pain. What a cruel, exaggerated fuss they'd made about the weight of her, stamping and circling the great dangling body with rhythmic chants of "large, large," and falling to the floor in mock faint, as if they'd just captured an elephant and hauled it up a tree. "And it's not just a couple of miles either, Julia," Kitty had added. "It's at least 50 from down here and the far side of Bodmin." "Yes, but—" and Julia pulled out the clincher. "You just must see her house. It's to die for, truly." Not perhaps the best choice of words in the circumstances, Kitty now thought as she mouthed her way through what had been their school hymn. She doubted it would have been Antonia's favourite. There could hardly have been happy abiding memories of her time at their dull home counties girls' school, where the casual spite of the pupils was equalled by a bitter streak of sarcasm among disappointed teaching staff, envying the careless youth of their charges. It was possible she'd never spoken of those days since, either walling up the hurt from the awful years, or even shrugging them off with no apparent effort. Either of those would be just as well, if Kitty and Julia were to offer convincing sympathy to Antonia's widower in the polite funeral aftermath out in the churchyard. How awful, but how justified, if he chose that moment to accuse loudly, "Oh, so you're two of those bullying bitches she talked about." The house was worth the trip, though. It took pride of place on the edge of the village, just tantalizingly visible from the road. Driving past its ornate iron gates on their way to the church, Kitty could only admit that Julia...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?